Hey friend, in this watercolor tutorial today, we're going to be learning how to paint this Indian's paintbrush Wildflower, which is inspired by some of the native wildflowers that grow in Rocky Mountain National Park. Without further ado, let's get painting. For today's watercolor tutorial, I'm going to be using red, purple, Prussian blue, burnt umber, and sap green. In addition to those colors, I'm also using a size 2 and size 6 round Princeton brush, and the size of my paper I'm working with is 5 by 7 inches. To start our painting, I want to mix our red we're going to be using for this Indian's paintbrush flower, and I'm just going to mix up some red with a hint of purple, and the purple is just going to give it a really nice depth of color. It's going to take away some of the really pop of brightness to just a plain red. And then I'm going to add the tiniest amount of burnt umber. So that's just going to make it slightly earthier and just have a lot more depth. So once we have this beautiful red mixed, I am going to be using my size 6 round brush, and I want to start to lay out the tops of this flower here. So the nice bright red parts. And I'm going to angle one of the flowers towards the left here. And all I'm doing is doing this kind of wispy, kind of swooping motion with my brush. Some of the brush strokes will be quite thick, like this one here, and some maybe a little bit more delicate. And I'm kind of just using this kind of wavy kind of motion and texture to this flower here. And we're going to do almost like a pine cone shape here. So the top will be slightly pointed. And again, some of the brush strokes are kind of thick and some are dainty, and we're kind of overlapping some of them. Now this one on this side here is going to fan in the opposite direction of this first side. Okay, I'm just going to kind of tuck in a few more petals at this base. Maybe I'll add just a couple elongated petals kind of popping through here. Alrighty, now I want to just lay out just a few bits of red in the center here, so that way we're mimicking some petals that are kind of facing forward. In between these white gaps we'll have a stem. But for now, we're just going to let that set, and I'm going to do the same thing off towards the right, but I'm going to do this flower slightly smaller than this one here. And again, I'm just going to carry forward with that kind of wispy, layered, textured brush strokes here using my size 6 brush, making sure that the top of this flower here kind of points and is elongated. Go ahead and kind of mimic the same kind of brush stroke on the opposite side. Gonna add a little bit more red in here. Just doing a few dainty, delicate stems towards the base here. And then just a few bits of red popping through the center gap area, leaving some white showing through. Now I just want to do a couple kind of more elongated petals at random, just to add some variety in the texture. Okay, so before we get moving on with some of our greenery, I'm just going to use my size 6 brush again and just add a few bits of layering with the same shade of red, and just add a few concentrated pops of color underneath some of the petals here, just to give this a little bit more depth and shading. Next up for our green that we'll be using, I am mixing up some Sap Green, a little bit of burnt umber into the Sap Green, and a touch of Prussian Blue. And now I'm going to paint just an angled curved line for our stem here. And then I'm going to do the same thing towards the base of this larger flower. And they'll kind of cross overlap just like so. We will kind of add some more detail to these base stems, but until then, we're actually going to now get our leaves laid out. And for the leaves, I am just going to layer some elongated lines to start. So here's our first one. Just above that, I'm going to kind of mirror that same elongated line and add a point to the leaf, and then just fill that leaf in. And for the leaves, we want to kind of overlap and layer some of these. And a lot of them are kind of pointed and elongated upward, especially as we kind of get to the base of the flower. And again, I'm just doing these kind of swooping curved lines, and then just mimicking that curved line, adding a little gap here, adding a point towards the end, and then filling in that leaf with that green color. And I'm being mindful of just overlapping so that way our leaves look more organic and not all the same. And I'm having some be larger and some smaller than others. So I'll do a couple smaller ones here towards the base of this flower. Okay, so once we have our leaves laid out, now I want to add just a few touches of green in a few of the white gaps here of the flowers, and just a few touches, very subtle. Not a ton, but just a few flecks of greenery on the outskirts of these flowers. Just kind of popping through using light pressure with my size 2 brush here. Okay, so once I have that green laid out, I want to next mix a really rich kind of purpley red color with a touch of brown. So I'm going to get a little bit of red and mix it with a touch of the burnt umber and some purple. And this is just going to add a lot of depth to our stem and the inside of these petals here. Okay, so I've got this really rich color, and I'm just going to kind of subtly outline some of our green stems here with this really rich, almost wine-like color, being mindful of the direction of some of the overlapping leaves, so not to cover some of those leaves up. Allowing some of the green of the stem to pop through. Okay, next I'm just going to carry on with this color and add kind of a root stem with this kind of plum purple red to go in between the white gaps here. And then from there, I'm just going to do a few flecks of this plum color, kind of fanning out on either side so that way they look like they are rooted with the petals more. That way our petals aren't floating. And again, these are just little dash marks using our size 2 brush with light pressure, just to give that inside flower some rooted connection between the stem and the petals. The last detail for our painting here is to use the same green that we mixed that had a touch of burnt umber and Prussian blue with our sap green. And I just want to give a little bit of shading to our leaves by just overlapping towards the bottom. And that'll just give the leaves a really nice shadow and little detail. And that is it for our Indians paintbrush. I hope you enjoyed this watercolor floral tutorial. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe so that way you don't miss any future watercolor tutorials on my channel.